The September sun cut through the Colorado mountains like a blade, casting long shadows across Fort Carson's weathered stone buildings. Established during the height of the Cold War, this sprawling military complex had transformed thousands of young Americans into warriors. Some returned home with medals pinned to their chests, others returned in flag-draped coffins, and a few, the unlucky ones, never returned at all. On this particular Tuesday morning, 32 elite operators stood at attention in Briefing Room 7. They represented the finest specimens each military branch could produce. Navy SEALs with kill counts that would never appear in any official record. Army Rangers who had survived the hell of Helmand Province and walked out carrying wounded brothers on their shoulders. Marine Force recon operators who could disappear into hostile territory and emerge weeks later with intelligence that shifted the balance of power. Air Force para-rescue jumpers who had pulled burning men from crashed helicopters while enemy rounds snapped past their ears. These were America's deadliest weapons. Human instruments of violence refined through years of combat and sacrifice. And then there was Kira Ashford. She stood in the back row, fifth from the right, wearing the same standard issue combat uniform as everyone else. But unlike her fellow trainees, whose chests displayed unit patches, campaign ribbons and badges earned through blood and sacrifice. Kira's uniform was conspicuously bare. No insignia, no decorations, nothing to distinguish her except the pronounced stillness in her posture and the way her hazel eyes tracked movement with predatory precision. At 29, she carried herself like a weapon that had learned patience. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a regulation bun. A small scar marked the skin above her right eyebrow. Her face revealed nothing. No warmth, no anxiety, just the flat assessment of someone cataloging threats. The other trainees had noticed her immediately when she arrived 3 days earlier. Noticed, assessed, dismissed. Lieutenant Colt Reardon had been the first to comment. The stocky SEAL with the permanent scowl and the attitude of a man who had never been second best at anything physical in his entire life. He had looked her up and down during the first formation with the kind of contempt usually reserved for recruits who quit during Hell Week. "Who the hell is that?" he had muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Admin trainee," someone had answered. "Paper pusher getting a checkbox ticked. Probably some general's niece who wanted to play soldier for a few months." The nickname had spread like wildfire through the barracks. By the end of the first day, everyone knew her as Deadweight Ashford, the woman who had somehow gamed the system to secure a slot in the most demanding joint training program in the United States military. Now, as the elite trainees waited for their commanding officer to arrive, the tension in the room felt thick enough to cut with a K-bar. This was not ordinary training. The Joint Special Operations Readiness Program handpicked operators from across all branches for 3 months of intensive evolution, designed to forge them into something beyond their individual capabilities. Half would wash out within the first 6 weeks. The other half would emerge as candidates for the nation's most classified missions, operations that would never be acknowledged, battles that would never be recorded, deaths that would be ruled training accidents regardless of how many enemy bullets had pierced the flesh. The door at the front of the briefing room swung open with military precision. General Marcus Blackwood entered like a storm system rolling across the plains. At 62, Blackwood embodied everything the American public imagined when they pictured a military commander. Ramrod posture that made him seem taller than his actual 6-foot frame. Silver hair cut to exact regulation standards, not a strand out of place. A face weathered by decades of command decisions that sent young men and women into harm's way. His dress uniform displayed 4 rows of ribbons, including the Silver Star, 3 Bronze Stars, and the Distinguished Service Cross. What those ribbons did not show was the blood on his hands from operations that officially never happened. Missions buried so deep in classified archives that even the operators who survived them sometimes doubted their own memories. Blackwood's cold blue eyes swept across the assembled trainees with the clinical assessment of a man who had spent 35 years evaluating human weapons. He moved down the line, slowly pausing occasionally to examine a particular operator more closely. His aide, a nervous captain carrying a tablet, followed 2 steps behind, like a well-trained dog. "Ladies and gentlemen," Blackwood's voice carried the gravel of a man who had screamed orders across combat zones from Panama to Fallujah. You represent the best your respective commands could offer. SEALs, Rangers, Delta, Marine Special Operations, Air Force Special Tactics. Each of you has proven yourselves in combat. Each of you believes you have earned the right to stand in this room. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over them like a burial shroud. You're wrong. Blackwood continued his inspection boots, clicking against the linoleum with metronomic precision. Click, click, click. The sound of authority made manifest. In this program, your past means nothing. Your decorations mean nothing. Your kill counts mean nothing. Here you are, unproven meat until you demonstrate that you possess the one quality that separates special operations from conventional forces. He stopped walking. His gaze moved from face to face with the cold efficiency of a targeting computer. Adaptability under pressure, the ability to operate effectively when every variable shifts simultaneously. When your primary plan fails, your backup plan fails, and you are forced to improvise with whatever resources remain while hostile forces close in on your position. The trainees remained motionless, but Kira noticed the subtle shifts in posture throughout the room. Chest puffing slightly, jaws tightening with determination. These were men and women accustomed to being the best, and Blackwood's challenge had activated their competitive instincts like blood in shark-infested waters. Blackwood resumed his inspection, moving past the first row, then the second. His aide made notations on the tablet with each pause, recording observations that would influence training assignments and performance evaluations. When Blackwood reached the back row, his pace slowed imperceptibly. He stopped directly in front of Kira Ashford. Their eyes met. Hers remained steady, neither defiant nor submissive, simply present, the gaze of someone who had learned long ago that showing emotion was a weakness that could get you killed. Blackwood's eyes traveled from her face downward, cataloging details with practiced efficiency. The way her uniform fit, the absence of any personalization in her gear, the calluses on her hands visible despite her parade rest position, calluses that told a story her blank service record did not. Then his gaze caught on something. Kira's left sleeve had snagged on her equipment belt clip during the formation shuffle, riding up perhaps 2 inches higher than regulation permitted. The morning light streaming through the room's high windows illuminated a section of her inner forearm that should have remained covered. Blackwood's entire body went rigid. The tattoo was small, no larger than a silver dollar, positioned precisely 3 inches above her wrist, where a watch would normally rest. A broken sword rendered in black ink, the blade fractured into 2 pieces at the midpoint, and running perpendicular to the break, 7 thin horizontal lines. Hash marks, precise and deliberate. The kind of marks that meant something specific to those who knew the language. The color drained from Blackwood's face as if someone had opened a valve and let all the blood rush to his feet. His aide noticed the general's sudden stillness. The captain looked up from the tablet with visible concern, mouth opening to ask what was wrong. "Sir, is everything?" Blackwood's hand shot up, silencing the question with a gesture that brooked no argument. His voice, when it emerged, carried a tremor that had not been there moments before. The voice of a man seeing a ghost. The voice of a man whose carefully constructed world had just developed a crack. "That mark." The words came out barely above a whisper, but in the silence of the briefing room, everyone heard them. "Where did you get that mark?" Kira's expression did not change. Her voice, when she responded, held the flat neutrality of someone reciting serial numbers. "Personal ink, sir. Acquired off duty." "Don't lie to me." Blackwood's voice cracked like a whip, loud enough that every trainee in the room flinched. Even the SEALs. Even the Delta operators who had seen things that would break normal men. They had never heard General Marcus Blackwood lose his composure. Until now. "That's not personal ink. That's a kill code. 7 marks. 7 confirmed close quarters eliminations." He stepped closer, his face now inches from hers. Close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath. Close enough to see the fear swimming behind his cold blue eyes. "And that sword. I know that sword. Warrior designation. Task Force Saber." The room plunged into absolute silence. Even the ventilation system seemed to hold its breath. Blackwood stumbled backward, nearly colliding with his aide. His hand reached out reflexively, grabbing the captain's shoulder for support. A four-star general, a man who had commanded armies, steadying himself like a drunk who had just seen something terrible in the mirror. His eyes never left Kira's face. Warrior number 26. The words came out hollow, haunted. Ethan Ashford. Kira's composure cracked for the first time since entering the briefing room. Not a break exactly. More like the briefest flicker of something dark and dangerous passing behind her eyes before the mask reasserted itself. A flash of lightning on a distant horizon. "My father, sir." The two words detonated in the room like a shaped charge. Blackwood's aide went pale, nearly dropping the tablet. Several trainees exchanged confused glances trying to process what they were witnessing. But a few of them, the oldest ones who had served during Desert Storm, wore expressions of dawning recognition. Expressions that suggested they were hearing a name they had heard whispered in certain circles. A name attached to a mission that officially never happened. Blackwood took another step backward, his hand releasing the aide's shoulder to point at Kira with an unsteady finger. "Your father, Ethan Ashford. He's dead, sir." Kira's voice remained steady, but something cold had crept into it. The cold of a woman who had waited a long time for this moment. Killed in action, Kuwait border, February 1991. Task Force Sabre deployment. Blackwood's mouth worked silently as if trying to form words that his vocal cords refused to produce. His lips moved, but nothing came out. The mighty general, the man who had briefed presidents and ordered strikes that killed hundreds, rendered speechless by a woman with a broken sword tattoo. Finally, he turned to his aide with barely controlled urgency. "Get Colonel Caraway on a secure line, now." The aide's fingers flew across the tablet, initiating what was clearly a priority communication. His hands were shaking. "Tell him the ghost has returned." Blackwood straightened his uniform with jerky movements, attempting to reassemble his composure, like a man picking up scattered pieces of broken glass. But the glass was too shattered, the cracks too visible. "This briefing is postponed," he announced to the room, though his eyes remained fixed on Kira. "All trainees report to the obstacle course for physical assessment. Captain Morrison will supervise." He drew a breath that seemed to take effort. "Dismissed." The trainees moved with military efficiency, filing toward the exit in practiced silence. But Kira could feel their eyes on her now. No longer the dismissive glances of operators looking at dead weight. Something else. Something curious. Something wary. She had just made a four-star general tremble. Whatever she was not a paper pusher. As she moved to join the exodus, Blackwood's voice stopped her cold. "Specialist Ashford, you stay." The last trainee exited the briefing room. The door closed with a soft click that sounded impossibly loud in the sudden emptiness. Kira turned to face Blackwood, who stood near the front of the room with his aide hovering nervously nearby. The general had recovered some of his composure, but his face remained ashen. The face of a man confronting a problem he had believed solved decades ago. "Sir," Kira's voice remained carefully neutral. Blackwood studied her with the intensity of a man examining ordnance that might explode at any moment. His eyes moved over her face, searching for something. Traces of her father, perhaps, or evidence of the threat she represented. When he finally spoke, his words emerged slowly, weighted with decades of carefully maintained secrets. "Your father was the finest point man I ever commanded. Instincts like radar could sense an ambush 3 minutes before it materialized. He saved my life twice in operations that officially never happened." Kira said nothing, waiting. "They told you he died in a training accident." Blackwood's statement was not a question. It was a test. "Yes, sir." "They lied." Blackwood moved toward the window, staring out at the Colorado landscape, as if seeing something else entirely. Something from 3 decades ago. Something that still haunted his nights. "Your father died completing his mission. He died a hero. But the operation was classified at levels that exceed your current clearance." Kira's voice cut through the careful ambiguity like a scalpel through flesh. Task Force Sabre. 20 elite operators deployed to retrieve Soviet technology from an Iraqi bunker complex during Desert Storm's aftermath. The mission went sideways. The facility was destroyed with your team inside. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. 20 men buried alive. All casualties ruled training accidents to maintain operational security. Blackwood spun from the window, his face now openly ashen. "Where did you get that information?" Kira held his gaze without flinching. The same place I got this tattoo, sir, from someone who survived. The aide's tablet slipped from nerveless fingers, clattering against the floor. Blackwood's hand moved toward his sidearm in a reflexive gesture, before stopping halfway. Not threatening, just the instinctive motion of a man confronting a threat he had believed neutralized. No one survived. Blackwood's voice lacked conviction, the voice of a man who had convinced himself of something for 3 decades and was now watching that conviction crumble. The blast radius alone. Colonel James Carraway survived, sir. Kira let the name land like a precision strike. Your executive officer, the man you forced into retirement 6 months before the Kuwait deployment because he questioned your risk assessment protocols. Blackwood's jaw clenched so hard Kira could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. A vein pulsed at his temple. His hands had curled into fists at his sides. Carraway is a bitter old man, manufacturing conspiracy theories to explain his failed career. Then why did you just order your aide to contact him on a secure line? The question hung in the air between them like a live grenade. Blackwood's aide had recovered his tablet and now stood frozen in the corner, clearly wishing he could be anywhere else on the planet. Perhaps anywhere else in the solar system. Blackwood's eyes narrowed. You didn't come to Fort Carson for training. No, sir. You came for me? Kira's expression remained impassive, but something shifted behind her eyes. Something cold and patient and absolutely committed. The look of a hunter who had finally cornered prey she had been tracking for years. I came for the truth about what happened to my father, and 19 other operators who deserve better than being erased from history. Blackwood's voice hardened into the tone of command, the voice he used when ordering young men into battles they might not survive. Your father died serving his country. That should be enough. It would be, sir. Kira stepped forward, closing the distance between them to arm's length. If you hadn't ordered the demolition while Task Force Sabre was still inside the facility. The accusation landed like an artillery round. Blackwood's aide made a strangled sound, a whimper of pure professional horror. He was witnessing a specialist accuse a 4-star general of murdering 20 of his own operators. Careers ended for less. People disappeared for less. The general's face cycled through shock fury and something that might have been fear before settling into stone-cold calculation. The face of a man who had survived decades in the deadliest levels of military politics. That's a treasonous accusation, specialist. One that could earn you a court-martial and decades in military prison? Kira did not back down. Only if it's false, sir. They stared at each other across the briefing room. Two people connected by death and secrets, and a reckoning that had been building since the Gulf War. The tablet in the aide's hands chirped. He glanced down at the screen, then looked up with visible relief at the interruption. Sir Colonel Carraway is on the secure line. He says it's urgent. Blackwood's eyes never left Kira's face. Tell him I'll call him back. Sir, the aide swallowed hard. He says to tell you specifically that if you don't take this call immediately, he's contacting the Senate Armed Services Committee with documentation he's been holding in reserve for 3 decades. The color drained from Blackwood's face again. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for the tablet. Everyone out, now! The aide practically ran for the door. Kira moved to follow, but Blackwood's voice stopped her halfway across the room. This isn't over, Specialist Ashford. Kira turned, meeting his gaze with the same unflinching directness her father had reportedly possessed. The same look Ethan Ashford had given his commanding officer when questioning orders that did not make sense. No, sir, it's just beginning. The hallway outside the briefing room was empty. Her fellow trainees had already moved to the obstacle course, eager to prove themselves in the physical assessment that would determine their standing in the program. Kira allowed herself the luxury of leaning against the wall for exactly 5 seconds. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, never from fear, but from the adrenaline spike of confronting the man responsible for her father's death. The man she had been hunting in one form or another since Colonel Carraway had found her 6 years ago and told her the truth about Captain Ethan Ashford's final mission. She could still remember that day, 23 years old, fresh from Army basic training with orders for intelligence school. A young woman who had joined the military to understand who her father had been since he had died before she drew her first breath. Carraway had appeared at her barracks like a ghost materializing from smoke, silver-haired and weathered with eyes that carried too much knowledge and too much pain. He had asked her one question. "Do you want to know how your father really died?" She had said yes, and nothing had ever been the same. 6 years of training, 6 years of preparation, 6 years of transforming herself from a promising recruit into something far more dangerous. Caraway had taught her everything her father never had the chance to pass down: how to shoot, how to fight, how to think tactically, how to blend into any environment, how to kill without hesitation when killing was required. 7 hash marks on her forearm. 7 contractors eliminated during operations with Caraway's covert investigation team. 7 lives taken to get the evidence they needed to prove that Task Force Sabre had not died in a training accident, that they had been sacrificed. Kira pushed off the wall and headed toward the exit. The obstacle course awaited. More importantly, 3 months of training alongside operators who had just learned that deadweight Ashford was anything but deadweight. Behind her, muffled through the briefing room door, she could hear Blackwood's voice rising in barely controlled fury as he spoke with the man who had become her mentor, her commanding officer, and the closest thing to a father she had ever known. Colonel James Ghost Caraway, the only man who had survived Task Force Sabre's last mission, and the only man who knew exactly why Kira Ashford had infiltrated Fort Carson 3 days before General Marcus Blackwood was scheduled to transport a recovered Soviet neuroweapon to this facility for field testing. The same weapon that had doomed Task Force Sabre back in '91. The same weapon that would finally give them the proof they needed to bring Blackwood to justice, if they could survive the next 96 hours. 12 miles northwest of Fort Carson, past winning fire roads that saw traffic maybe twice a month, a weathered ranch house sat nestled among the Colorado pines. To anyone who bothered looking, this was the home of a retired Army colonel who had spent his golden years in bitter isolation. Local records showed James Caraway as the owner, a man who kept to himself, made occasional trips to town for supplies, and drank whiskey on his porch while staring at mountains that never judged him. What the records did not show was the underground facility beneath the barn, or the surveillance equipment hidden in the trees, or the fact that Colonel James Caraway was anything but isolated. The bunker stretched 40 feet in each direction, carved from bedrock and reinforced with modern materials installed quietly over the past 2 decades. Banks of computer equipment lined one wall, their screens displaying news feeds, satellite imagery, and encrypted communication channels that would make the NSA nervous. Another wall held photographs, 20 photographs to be precise. Each showed a young man in military dress uniform, their faces frozen in formal portrait poses that could not quite hide the warrior intensity behind their eyes. Names and ranks were printed beneath each photo in careful block letters. Captain Ethan Ashford, Lieutenant David Caraway, Master Sergeant Lucas Kane. The list continued. 20 warriors who had comprised Task Force Sabre, 20 men who had deployed to Kuwait in February 1991, 20 men who had never come home. Caraway stood before the wall, now a secure phone pressed to his ear, listening to Marcus Blackwood's fury crackle through the encrypted connection. At 71, Caraway carried himself with the erect posture of someone who had spent 50 years in uniform. But his civilian clothes, worn jeans and a faded flannel shirt, suggested comfortable retirement. His silver hair was cut military short. His face bore the lines of someone who had lived through things that would break lesser men. His eyes, however, told the real story. Pale blue and absolutely sharp, they cataloged details with the automatic precision of a man who had spent decades in special operations. A man who knew that missing one detail meant death. "Listen to me carefully, Marcus." Caraway's voice was calm, the calm of a man who had been waiting for this conversation since Desert Storm. "You have 2 choices. You can cooperate with Kira's investigation, provide the documentation we need to expose what really happened in Kuwait, and spend your remaining years in a minimum security facility writing memoirs that no one will publish." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "Or you can fight, activate your contractors, try to eliminate the problem the way you eliminated Task Force Sabre. But I promise you, Marcus, if anything happens to that girl, everything I have goes to the Senate Armed Services Committee, the Washington Post, and every news organization that still believes in investigative journalism." Blackwood's response was a snarl of threats and denials. Caraway listened with the patience of a man who had heard it all before. "You made one mistake, Marcus. Back in '91, you assumed everyone died in that bunker. You assumed no one would ever question the official story. You assumed your secrets were safe. He looked at the photograph of Ethan Ashford, the man who had been his best friend, the man whose pregnant wife had received a flag and a lie instead of a living husband. But I survived, and I never forgot. And now Ethan's daughter is going to finish what we started. He ended the call before Blackwood could respond. For a long moment, Caraway stood in silence, staring at the wall of faces. Brothers who had trusted him. Brothers who had died because a general valued a weapon more than the men who retrieved it. His phone buzzed. A text from Kira. Package delivered. He's rattled. Moving to phase 2. Caraway typed his response. Confirmed. 5 contractors arrived at Fort Carson this morning. Threat level elevated. Watch your 6. He paused, then added another message. One more thing, Kate. I'm not staying at the ranch. Once you're inserted for the wilderness exercise, I'm going mobile. Parallel route. Close enough to provide support if things go sideways? The response came quickly. That's not the plan. You're supposed to coordinate from the bunker. Caraway smiled grimly. The plan adapts. I didn't spend 6 years training you just to watch you die alone in a Colorado forest. I'll stay invisible. Blackwood won't spot me. I've been a ghost longer than you've been alive. A pause, then copy that. But if you compromise the operation, I won't. Trust the process, Kate. Your father did. He set down the phone and moved to the computer station. The screen showed real-time feeds from surveillance assets positioned around Fort Carson, thermal imaging, communication intercepts, movement tracking. Blackwood was already making calls, already activating assets, already moving to eliminate the threat that Kira Ashford represented. But Caraway had spent 3 decades preparing for this moment. He knew Blackwood's playbook, knew his resources, knew his weaknesses. Most importantly, he knew that Kira Ashford had inherited more than just her father's hazel eyes. She had inherited his instincts, his determination, his absolute refusal to quit. Ethan Ashford had been the finest point man Caraway had ever served with, the kind of operator who could feel danger before it materialized, the kind of warrior who made the impossible look routine. His daughter was the same, perhaps better. And in 96 hours, when Project Osiris arrived at Fort Carson, she would prove it to everyone who had ever dismissed her as dead weight, including General Marcus Blackwood, especially General Marcus Blackwood. Somewhere in the darkness of a Kuwaiti bunker, 3 decades in the past, a young captain named Ethan Ashford sat in the amber glow of a chemical light stick. Around him, 19 other operators prepared for extraction. Weapons checked, gear secured. The mission objective, a spherical device covered in cuneiform inscriptions that predated human civilization, sat in a reinforced container at the center of their formation. They had done the impossible, infiltrated an Iraqi bunker complex that Soviet intelligence had sworn did not exist, retrieved technology that defied understanding, and now they waited for the helicopters that would carry them home. Ethan pulled a small notebook from his pocket, the same notebook his wife had given him before deployment, with instructions to write her every day. He had kept that promise. Even now, with extraction 30 minutes away, he found himself putting pen to paper. My love, if you're reading this, something went wrong. But I need you to know some things before the details get lost in whatever story they decide to tell. We found something today. Something old. Older than anything should be. The boys are calling it a Soviet weapon, but I looked at those inscriptions. They're not Russian. They're not anything I've ever seen. And when I stood close to it, I felt something. Like static electricity, but inside my head. I don't trust it. Don't trust the mission. Don't trust why they sent us here instead of a larger force. But I trust my brothers. And I trust that whatever happens, I did my duty. If it's a girl, name her Kira. It means beam of light. And God knows this world needs more light. Tell her that her father loved her before he ever met her. Tell her, I'm sorry, I won't be there to teach her how to ride a bike, or scare away her first boyfriend, or walk her down the aisle. But most of all, tell her this: never let anyone convince you that you're not enough. The world will try to put you in boxes. Break those boxes, burn them, be whoever you decide to be. Your father believes in you, even now, even before you're born, especially then. He signed the letter the way he signed all of them. Love always, Dad. He folded the paper carefully, tucked it into the waterproof pouch he wore against his chest, the pouch that contained every letter he had written during the deployment. The radio crackled. Sabre lead, this is Eagle Actual. Confirm status. Ethan keyed his mic. Eagle Actual Sabre lead. Package secured. All personnel accounted for. Ready for extraction. Copy Sabre lead. Extraction is 17 minutes out. Hold position. Roger that. Ethan leaned back against the bunker wall. 17 minutes. Then home. Then meeting his daughter for the first time. He did not know that the letters in his pouch would be buried under tons of rubble. Did not know that his daughter would grow up without a father. Did not know that the man on the other end of that radio had already decided that Task Force Sabre would never leave this bunker alive. 17 minutes, an eternity, and no time at all. The morning sun blazed overhead as Kira made her way across Fort Carson's sprawling grounds. The confrontation with Blackwood had shifted something fundamental in the air around her. She was no longer invisible, no longer dismissed. She was a threat, and threats in this world had a way of being eliminated. The crucible stretched before her like a serpent of steel and concrete, 2 miles of integrated obstacles designed to break the weak and humble the strong. Walls, ropes, mud pits, barriers, log carries. Low crawls under barbed wire. Every element engineered to simulate combat conditions under physical and mental stress. Captain Morrison stood at the starting line with a clipboard in hand. His weathered face bore the permanent squint of a man who had spent 20 years evaluating warriors. At 45, he had earned his position as lead instructor through combat deployments in Iraq, Afghanistan, and places that did not appear on any public deployment roster. 31 trainees assembled near the start line, their physical training uniforms stark against the Colorado landscape. 31 of America's finest operators minus the one who had washed out during the morning's initial assessment. Kira could feel their eyes on her now. No longer the dismissive glances reserved for dead weight. Something else. Curiosity, wariness, the careful observation of predators encountering something they did not understand. Listen up. Morrison's voice carried across the morning air without need for amplification. The voice of a man who had screamed orders through sandstorms and firefights. This isn't your basic confidence course. We call it the Crucible. 2 miles of integrated obstacles designed to simulate combat conditions under physical and mental stress. Your objective is simple. Complete the course. Your time determines your standing within the training cycle. He gestured to a large display board showing yesterday's qualification times. The leader had finished in 18 minutes, 47 seconds. The last qualifier had barely scraped by at 29 minutes, 58 seconds. The 30-minute mark represented the cut line. Anything slower meant remedial training. For repeat failures, removal from the program. Current record is 15 minutes, 12 seconds. Morrison paused, letting that number sink in. Set by a Delta operator in 2019. I don't expect anyone to beat that today. I just expect you not to embarrass yourselves. Lieutenant Colt Reardon raised his hand. At 32, Reardon had the build of someone who treated CrossFit like religion and possessed the confidence of a man who had never failed at anything physical in his life. His square jaw and cold blue eyes had intimidated countless junior operators during his decade in the teams. Sir, what about dead weight? Reardon gestured toward Kira with deliberate contempt. She going to hold up the whole program while she figures out which end of a rope to climb? Several trainees chuckled, the nervous laughter of men who sensed blood in the water. Morrison's expression did not change, but Kira noticed the slight tightening around his eyes. Instructors like Morrison did not appreciate disruptions to their carefully maintained training flow. Specialist Ashford will complete the course like everyone else, Lieutenant Reardon. If she fails to meet standards, she'll be remediated or removed according to protocol. Same as you. Reardon's jaw tightened. With respect, sir, we all earned our slots here through combat deployments and selection courses. What did she do? Fill out the right paperwork. This time the laughter was more widespread. Even some of the Rangers joined in, the pack mentality asserting itself. Find the weak link, expose it, eliminate it. Kira remained still. Her face betrayed nothing. Morrison checked his watch. Reardon, since you're so concerned about program integrity, you'll run first. Show us how a real SEAL performs. Reardon's grin widened, the grin of a shark who had just been invited to feed. Yes, sir. He moved to the start line, stretching with the casual confidence of someone who had run similar courses 100 times. His muscles coiled beneath his PT uniform like springs waiting to release. Morrison raised his stopwatch. On my mark, 3, 2, 1, go! Reardon exploded forward like a sprinter from the blocks. His technique was flawless, power and efficiency in perfect balance. He hit the first obstacle, a 15-foot wall, without breaking stride, scaled it in seconds, dropped to the far side with the controlled landing of a cat, continued toward the rope climb without losing momentum. Kira watched with analytical detachment. Reardon was good, extremely good. His time would likely land in the top 3 for the day. But she also noticed the subtle inefficiencies, the extra half-second he took to adjust his grip on the rope, the way he attacked the tire flip with pure strength rather than leveraging momentum, the micro pauses as he calculated each obstacle instead of flowing through them. Trained killers developed patterns. They found techniques that worked and repeated them until they became reflexive. It made them fast. It made them effective. It also made them predictable. 19 minutes later, Reardon crossed the finish line. His chest heaved, but he still managed a triumphant fist pump. Still had enough breath to shoot a contemptuous look toward Kira. Morrison noted the time. 18 minutes 31 seconds. Solid run, Reardon. Second fastest so far today. The SEAL jogged back toward the formation, accepting congratulations from several other trainees. When he passed Kira, he made sure their eyes met. Try not to die out there, deadweight. I'd hate to waste a morning doing paperwork on your washout. Kira's expression remained neutral. I'll do my best. The morning progressed. One by one, operators attacked the crucible with varying degrees of success. A Ranger finished in 19 minutes, 8 seconds. An Air Force pararescue jumper clocked 22 minutes, 14 seconds. A Marine failed the rope climb twice and was pulled from the course with a time that would require remediation. By the time Morrison called Kira's name, the sun had climbed higher, warming the Colorado air to a pleasant 65 degrees. 17 trainees had completed the course. 3 had washed out. Kira would be the 21st attempt. She moved to the start line, aware of every eye tracking her progress. The betting had started around the 10th runner. Current odds had her washing out before completing even half the obstacles. Some of the SEALs had a pool going on exactly which element would break her. The rope climb was the favorite. The log carry a close second. Morrison met her eyes for just a moment. Something flickered in his expression. Not sympathy exactly. More like curiosity, as if he suspected there might be more to deadweight Ashford than administrative incompetence. Ready, specialist? Yes, sir. On my mark. 3, 2, 1. Go. Kira moved, not with Reardon's explosive power, not with the Ranger's aggressive determination. She moved with the fluid economy of someone who had learned long ago that energy management separated survivors from casualties. Her stride ate ground without appearing rushed. Her breathing remained controlled even as her heart rate climbed. Smooth, efficient, the movement of water finding its way downhill. The first obstacle, the 15-foot wall. Reardon had attacked it straight on, using raw upper body strength to haul himself over. Kira hit it at an angle, using her momentum to carry her upward. Her fingers found the top edge. One smooth pull and she was over, dropping to a controlled crouch on the far side, never stopping, never wasting motion. Behind her, murmurs from the watching trainees. The rope climb came next. 30 feet of vertical ascent using only arms and technique. Reardon had powered through it with pure upper body strength, his muscles bulging with effort. Kira wrapped the rope around her leg, creating a lock that allowed her to use her entire body rather than just her arms. She ascended in smooth, efficient movements that looked almost lazy compared to the frantic climbing of previous runners. But lazy was fast. She reached the top in less time than Reardon, touched the bell, descended in a controlled slide that left her palms only slightly warm from friction. The murmurs grew louder. Tire flip, weighted sled drag, log carry, low crawl under barbed wire, balance beam over water obstacle. Each challenge presented different requirements. Each could be attacked with power or with technique. Kira chose technique every time, not because she lacked strength. Her arms bore the lean muscle of someone who trained for function rather than appearance. 6 years of Caraway's brutal regimen had forged her body into something efficient and deadly. But strength had limits. Technique properly applied could multiply force beyond raw muscle, could turn a 120-pound woman into something that moved through obstacle courses like they were designed for her specifically. Morrison watched her progress with increasing intensity. His stopwatch clicked steadily, marking seconds that accumulated into minutes. By the time Kira approached the final obstacle, an A-frame cargo net requiring a climb up one side and controlled descent down the other, Morrison was no longer trying to hide his interest. She crested the A-frame's peak, paused for a fraction of a second to assess the far side, then descended in a rapid hand-over-hand motion that looked reckless, but was actually precisely controlled. Her boots hit the ground. She sprinted the final 100 yards to the finish line, crossing it with breathing that was elevated but not desperate. Morrison clicked the stopwatch, stared at the display, clicked it again as if doubting the reading. "Time," Reardon called from the crowd of watching trainees. His voice carried an edge of anticipation, ready to mock whatever number confirmed his assessment of deadweight Ashford. Morrison looked up, his expression carefully neutral in a way that told Kira everything she needed to know. 17 minutes, 43 seconds. The silence that followed was absolute, then chaos. "Bullshit!" Reardon snapped, pushing forward through the crowd. "Run it again. Equipment malfunction." Morrison's voice cut through the protests like a blade through silk. "The equipment is calibrated daily, Lieutenant. The time stands." "She couldn't have," Reardon stopped himself, probably realizing that arguing further would make him look weak, would make it seem like a woman with no combat patches had gotten under his skin. But Morrison was not finished. He pulled up his tablet, accessing the course records database. When he found what he was looking for, his eyes narrowed fractionally. 17 minutes, 43 seconds makes Specialist Ashford the third fastest time ever recorded on this course, faster than 90% of operators who've attempted it in the past 5 years. Morrison's eyes found Reardon. "Including you, Lieutenant." The SEAL's face darkened, a storm building behind his eyes. "This is wrong. She's admin. She shouldn't even be here." Kira walked past him toward the water station, her expression betraying nothing. Inside, her heart hammered, not from exertion, from controlled fury, the fury that had been building for 6 years, the fury that she channeled into becoming exactly what her father had been before Blackwood's betrayal ended his life, an operator who made the impossible look routine. She filled a canteen with water, aware that a figure had approached from her left, female, tall, athletic build beneath the standard PT uniform, Captain Tessa Holloway, Army Intelligence, one of only 3 women in the program. She had kept to herself since arriving at Fort Carson, observing more than participating, the careful behavior of someone trained to gather information rather than display capability. "Where did you learn to move like that?" Holloway's voice was quiet, pitched so only Kira could hear. "Same place everyone else did. Training." "No." Holloway shook her head slowly. "That wasn't training. That was experience. Combat experience. The kind you don't get from PT tests and qualification courses." Kira drank slowly before responding. "According to my file, I've never deployed outside CONUS. According to your file," Holloway repeated the words with undisguised skepticism. "Interesting that everyone keeps referencing your file, but nobody's actually seen it. Almost like it's been restricted above our clearance level." Kira met her eyes, assessing, calculating. Tessa Holloway represented a variable she had not fully anticipated, an intelligence analyst with access to classified databases and the analytical skills to connect dots that should have remained separate. "What do you want, Captain?" Holloway glanced around, making sure no one was close enough to overhear. "This afternoon, 2 Department of Defense contractors checked into the administrative building. They requested access to trainee files, specifically your file. When they were told it was restricted, they made calls to Washington. Within an hour, they had authorization to review everything except your assignment history." Kira's tactical mind cataloged this information. The contractors were gathering intelligence, building a profile, looking for vulnerabilities, standard pre-operation reconnaissance for a target elimination mission. "You seem very well informed about activities in the administrative building." Holloway's expression remained carefully neutral. I'm Army intelligence. Being well-informed is literally my job description. They stood in silence for a moment. Two women surrounded by elite male operators. Two women who clearly knew more than they were saying. I've been tracking anomalies in classified programs for the past 2 years. Holloway's voice dropped even lower. Ghost operations that leave traces in the data even when someone tries to erase them. 3 months ago, I found references to something called Project Osiris, ancient Soviet technology recovered during Desert Storm. The files were heavily redacted, but I pieced together enough to know it involved neural manipulation technology, and that the recovery team was killed in what official reports called a training accident. The name triggered something in Kira's memory, a story Caraway had told her during training, a moment from the bunker that still haunted his dreams. February 1991. The bunker complex beneath the Kuwaiti border. Task Force Sabre had breached the final chamber and found it waiting for them. Osiris, a sphere approximately 18 inches in diameter, covered in cuneiform inscriptions that predated Sumerian civilization by millennia. Resting on a pedestal that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of obsidian. Ethan Ashford had been the first to approach it. What the hell is this thing? His voice had carried wonder and dread in equal measure. The instinct that had made him the finest point man in special operations was screaming that something was wrong, that they had found something that should have stayed buried. Looks like something from a horror movie, one of his teammates had said. Ethan had shaken his head slowly. No, worse. This is something from before horror movies, before anything we understand. He had turned to Colonel Caraway. Sir, I don't think we should touch this. I don't think anyone should touch this. But orders were orders, and 17 minutes later, the bunker had collapsed on top of them. Kira blinked, pushing the memory away, focusing on the present. Why are you telling me this? Holloway leaned closer. Because this afternoon, after you revealed that tattoo to General Blackwood, I ran your biometrics through every database I could access. You're not in any of them. Your service record starts in 2019 with no prior history, no social media presence, no financial records before age 18. Her dark eyes held Kira's gaze with uncomfortable intensity. You appeared in the system fully formed, like someone created your identity from scratch. The assessment was uncomfortably accurate. So here's what I think. I think you're connected to whatever happened with Project Osiris. I think General Blackwood knows it, and I think tomorrow's wilderness evolution is going to be a lot more dangerous than Captain Morrison suggested. Kira weighed her options. Tessa Holloway could be an asset, an intelligence analyst with access to information and analytical capabilities that could prove invaluable in the coming days. Or she could be a complication, someone whose investigation might interfere with the carefully planned operation that Kira and Caraway had been building toward for 6 years. What do you want? Holloway's answer came without hesitation. The truth. Whatever Blackwood did with Project Osiris, whatever happened to that recovery team, it's being covered up at levels that make senior intelligence officials nervous. I want it exposed. I want accountability. And if I said I have no idea what you're talking about, Holloway's lips curved in something that was not quite a smile. Then I'd say you're a talented liar. But I'd also say that tomorrow morning when we're inserted into those mountains, I'm watching your back. Because if those contractors are planning something, they're planning it for when you're isolated and vulnerable. She turned and walked away, leaving Kira alone with questions that had no easy answers. That night, Kira slipped away from the barracks. The motor pool sat on the eastern edge of the training compound. Vehicles, equipment, the minimal survival gear that would be issued tomorrow morning. The building was locked, but the windows were old. The security designed to keep out casual thieves rather than trained operators. Kira was inside within 90 seconds. The equipment cage held rucksacks, sleeping bags, and the standard survival kits assigned to each team. She found the section marked for her team and examined the contents. Compass, military knife, canteen. All appeared normal, except the compass. Kira held it up to the dim emergency lighting, checking the casing with fingers that had learned to feel inconsistencies the way musicians felt wrong notes. A hairline crack ran along the base, barely visible. She twisted the housing, It separated. Inside, soldered to the interior surface, a tiny electronic device no larger than a watch battery. A tracking beacon. Kira checked Holloway's assigned equipment. Same modification. Every piece of gear designated for tomorrow's evolution had been compromised. The contractors would not need to hunt for them. They would know exactly where to find their targets. Every step, every pause, every moment of vulnerability broadcast in real time to whoever monitored the frequency. She carefully reassembled the compass, leaving no trace of her discovery. Let them think their surveillance remained undetected. The element of surprise worked both ways. The helicopter's rotors beat against the pre-dawn darkness, a rhythmic thunder that made conversation impossible. Kira sat in the cargo bay with 11 other trainees, their faces illuminated by the red glow of the interior lighting. Tessa Holloway occupied the position directly across from her. Eyes closed but posture too alert for sleep, the careful stillness of someone conserving energy for what lay ahead. Colt Reardon sat 3 positions down, methodically checking his minimal gear with the obsessive precision of a SEAL who had learned that small oversights got people killed. The crew chief held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes to insertion. Kira ran final mental checks. The compromised compass sat in her cargo pocket, its tracking beacon transmitting her position to whoever monitored the frequency. Her knife, a standard issue K-bar, had been examined and found clean. The canteen held water and nothing else. The emergency flare remained sealed in its waterproof case, but she had also brought items that had not been on the authorized equipment list. A length of paracord wrapped around her waist beneath her jacket, a small fire starter disguised as a button on her cargo pants, and tucked into her boot a 4-inch blade that Caraway had given her 6 years ago. Sometimes survival requires tools the enemy doesn't know you possess. The crew chief pointed at Kira and Holloway, then gestured toward the door, their insertion point. The helicopter banked sharply, descending toward a small clearing barely visible in the darkness below. 50 feet, 30 feet. The skids kissed Earth with barely a jolt. Go! 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 Kira and Holloway dropped from the helicopter, boots hitting rocky ground as the aircraft's downwash created a miniature dust storm. They moved quickly away from the landing zone, heading toward the tree line as the helicopter lifted off behind them. Within seconds, the sound of the rotors faded into the distance, leaving them in darkness broken only by the first hints of dawn on the eastern horizon. Holloway pulled out her compass, orienting herself to the topographical features barely visible in the dim light. Rally Point is 30 miles northeast. If we maintain good pace, we can cover it in 36 hours with time for rest. Kira studied their surroundings with different priorities. The insertion point was a natural choke point, surrounded by higher ground that would provide excellent observation positions for anyone watching. If the contractors were planning an ambush, they would want it to happen away from the insertion zone, where helicopter crews might witness suspicious activity. That meant the attack would come later, probably 8 to 12 hours from now, when the targets were tired, isolated, deep enough into the wilderness that their deaths could be attributed to natural hazards. We need to move, but not toward the rally point, not yet. Holloway's eyes narrowed. You want to explain that? Kira held up the compass, twisted the housing, revealed the tracking beacon. Holloway's expression hardened as she examined the device. Her fingers traced the hairline crack, the careful concealment, the installation that spoke of resources and planning. They're hunting us. 5 contractors, probably former special operations, authorized by General Blackwood to eliminate a threat he can't afford to leave active. Kira kept her voice low. Sound carried unpredictably in mountain terrain. They'll wait until we're exhausted and isolated, then stage an accident. Rockfall, a fall from a cliff, exposure, something that explains away 2 bodies without raising questions. Holloway processed this information with the speed of a trained intelligence analyst. You knew this was coming. I suspected it. The beacon confirms it. Holloway was silent for a long moment, weighing implications, recalculating her understanding of the situation. Who are you really? Kira met her eyes, deciding in that moment how much truth to share. The daughter of a man General Blackwood murdered 3 decades ago, the protege of the only operator who survived that murder, and someone who's been planning this reckoning for 6 years. The sky lightened incrementally, transforming the darkness into gray half-light that revealed the terrain in greater detail. They stood in a mountain clearing surrounded by pine forest, rocky ridges visible to the north and west, a stream cutting through the valley below. Holloway crushed the tracking beacon beneath her boot. If we destroy the trackers, they lose our position, but they also know we're aware of them, which changes their tactical approach. Better to let them think we're ignorant, use their overconfidence against us. Kira produced the beacon from her own compass, intact. We feed them the position data they expect, lead them into terrain we choose, then turn hunters into prey. Holloway absorbed that, her intelligence training warring with the ingrained respect for chain of command that defined military culture. You're talking about killing contractors, American contractors. That's survival. Kira's voice carried no hesitation. They're not coming to arrest us or intimidate us. They're coming to bury us. The only question is whether we let them. Holloway's jaw tightened, a decision made. Tell me what you need. They moved through the Colorado wilderness, following a route that paralleled the expected path toward the rally point, but took them through terrain Kira had studied extensively during her weeks of preparation. She had memorized topographical maps, identified tactical positions, war game scenarios exactly like this one, because Caraway had taught her that special operations succeeded or failed in the preparation phase. The operators who survived were the ones who planned for contingencies that seemed paranoid until they became reality. 3 hours into the hike, Kira called a halt near a stream that cascaded down a rocky slope. They refilled canteens. The sun had climbed higher, warming the air to a comfortable 60 degrees. Under different circumstances, it would have been a pleasant morning hike through beautiful wilderness. But Kira could feel the weight of observation, somewhere behind them, possibly miles away, but closing the distance. Veterans with weapons and authorization were tracking 2 beacon signals that represented targets to be eliminated. A sound carried across the distance, barely audible, but distinct to ears trained to identify threats. The snap of a branch breaking under weight, approximately 400 meters behind them. Upslope from their current position, Kira and Holloway froze. Their hunters had closed the distance faster than expected. Using the beacon signal to parallel their route while staying out of visual range, Kira pointed to a rocky outcropping 200 meters ahead, then held up 5 fingers and pointed to her eyes. Observation position, 5 minutes. Holloway nodded understanding. They moved with careful speed, leaving the stream and climbing toward higher ground. The outcropping provided cover and excellent sight lines back along their trail. They settled into position, controlling their breathing, becoming part of the landscape. 12 minutes later, 2 figures appeared in the valley below. Both men wore civilian hiking clothes, earth tones that blended with the forest environment. Both moved with the practiced efficiency of experienced operators. One carried what appeared to be a day pack, but the way he held it suggested concealed weight, a weapon. The other held a tablet device, tracking the beacon signals. Kira studied them through a gap in the rocks, memorizing details. The lead man was approximately 6 feet tall, lean build, dark hair cut military short. He scanned the terrain with thoroughness that spoke of years in hostile environments. The second man was shorter, stockier, with a reddish beard that violated military grooming standards but was common among private contractors who no longer answered to regulations. They stopped near the stream, examining the ground where Kira and Holloway had rested. The shorter man pointed to boot prints in the soft earth near the water. They consulted the tablet, confirming that the beacon signals matched this location. Then they split up. The taller man continued along the stream, following the obvious trail. The shorter man moved upslope, taking a flanking route that would allow him to spot targets from above if they continued along the valley floor. Classic pursuit tactics, and confirmation that these were not amateurs playing at security work. These were veterans executing a coordinated hunt. Holloway leaned close, her breath warm against Kira's ear. 2 down here. That means 3 more somewhere in the operational area. Kira nodded. 5 contractors total, probably working in teams. 2 on direct pursuit, 3 more positioned ahead, either setting up an ambush point or providing mobile response if the targets deviated from expected routes. We need to separate them, take them down individually before they can coordinate. Holloway's voice carried doubt. Take them down how we've got knives. They've got firearms. Then we make sure they never get a chance to use them. Kira studied the terrain, running calculations. The taller contractor was moving along the stream, periodically checking the tablet to confirm his targets remained ahead. His route would take him beneath their current position in approximately 8 minutes. The stockier man was climbing the slope, but on a trajectory that would bring him past their outcropping on the far side. Out of visual range. 2 targets, 2 opportunities, but only if they moved now. Kira pointed to herself, then downward toward the stream. She pointed to Holloway, then toward the upslope route. Holloway's eyes widened fractionally. Understanding the plan, they would each engage a target simultaneously, eliminating both threats before either could alert the others. It was tactically sound. It was also incredibly dangerous. Hand-to-hand combat against trained operators meant that even a small mistake would be fatal. But allowing the contractors to continue pursuit meant eventual ambush in terrain of the enemy's choosing. Better to fight now. On ground they had selected. Holloway's jaw tightened, but she nodded agreement. She had committed to this course when she had acknowledged the tracking beacon, when she had asked Kira what she needed. Now she would see it through. They separated, moving with the absolute silence that marked years of fieldcraft training. Kira descended toward the stream, using rocks and trees for cover, tracking the tall contractor's progress through the forest below. He moved confidently, secure in the knowledge that his targets were unaware of pursuit, that he had 4 teammates providing backup if complications arose. That confidence would kill him. Kira reached a position 10 meters from the stream, concealed behind a fallen log thick with moss. She could hear the contractor approaching, his boots crunching on gravel, his breathing steady, relaxed. She controlled her own breathing, slowing her heart rate, becoming part of the landscape. He appeared through the trees, moving along the stream bank with his eyes on the tablet rather than his surroundings. 20 meters away, 15, 10. Kira exploded from cover with the suddenness of a predator strike. The contractor's combat instincts were excellent. He sensed the attack half a second before impact, his hand moving toward the concealed weapon beneath his jacket. But half a second was not enough. Kira closed the distance in 3 explosive steps, her body low and driving forward. She struck him in the solar plexus with her shoulder, the impact driving the air from his lungs and throwing him backward. He tried to bring the weapon up, but she was already inside his guard, her hand clamping over his mouth while her other hand drove her boot knife upward beneath his ribcage. 4.5 inches of sharpened steel penetrated between the 4th and 5th ribs, angled upward toward the heart. The contractor's eyes went wide with shock and pain. He tried to scream, but her hand blocked the sound. Tried to fight, but the blade had already done catastrophic damage. 10 seconds later, he stopped moving. Kira lowered him to the ground, checking vital signs and finding none. She felt nothing, no triumph, no horror, no satisfaction. Caraway had warned her about this moment 6 years ago in the underground training facility beneath his ranch. The first kill changes you, he had said while teaching her the exact technique she had just used. The angle of the blade, the location between the ribs, the twist that ensured the target would not survive. Some operators feel guilt, some feel exhilaration, some feel nothing at all. None of those responses are wrong. They're just responses. He had met her eyes with the steady gaze of a man who had killed more people than he could count. What matters is what you do after, whether you let it define you or whether you define it. Your father never enjoyed killing, but he never hesitated when killing was necessary. He understood the difference between murder and mission. Kira understood now. This was mission, and 4 more targets remained. She appropriated his weapon, a Sig Sauer P226 with a suppressor attached. Checked the magazine. 15 rounds of subsonic ammunition designed for quiet elimination. She took the tablet as well, noting that it showed 2 beacon signals, hers and Holloway's, still moving northeast along the expected route. A sound carried through the forest, not loud, but distinctive, the thud of something heavy hitting the ground. Then silence. Holloway had completed her part. Kira moved upslope, following the trajectory the stockier contractor had taken. She found Holloway 30 meters from their original observation point, standing over a body, The contractor lay face down, a pool of blood spreading beneath his torso. Holloway's knife was clean, but her hands shook slightly as she stared at what she had done. "First time?" Kira asked quietly. Holloway nodded, not trusting her voice. "The shaking is adrenaline. It'll pass. You did what you had to do." "I killed a man." "You survived an assassination attempt. There's a difference." Holloway looked up, her eyes carrying something that might have been gratitude or horror or both. "What now?" "Now we use their equipment to track the others." Before they realize these two aren't reporting in, Kira examined the dead contractor's gear. Another P-226, a tactical knife, a radio earpiece connected to an encrypted communication system, and a second tablet identical to the first. She activated the radio, keeping the volume low, static. Then a voice. "Team 2 status." The voice carried authority, a slight southern accent, probably the team leader coordinating the operation from a mobile position. Kira did not respond, letting the silence stretch. "Team 3 moved to intercept coordinates. Team 2 is not responding. Could be equipment failure, but confirm visual on targets." Kira pulled up the tactical display on the appropriated tablet. It showed 5 position markers. 2 were stationary, the dead contractors at their feet. 3 were mobile, converging on a position approximately 2 miles northeast. The ambush point where the remaining contractors expected to intercept their targets. Except their targets were no longer following the expected route. "They'll realize something's wrong when we don't show up at the intercept point." Holloway had recovered enough composure to think tactically, which gives us maybe 30 minutes before they backtrack and find the bodies. "We use that time to reach their command post." "You think they left someone at the command post?" "I think 5 contractors is a big operation for 2 targets. Probably means there's a 6th person handling communications and coordination. Someone not combat trained, but essential to the operation." Holloway absorbed that, her intelligence training filling in implications. "You want to capture their communications specialist." "I want their evidence." Blackwood wouldn't authorize this operation without documentation showing proper authorization. That documentation is probably at the command post, and it's exactly what we need to prove he ordered our assassination. They moved quickly, backtracking along the contractor's approach route. Trained killers left minimal traces, but Kira had been trained by one of the best. She found the subtle signs. A disturbed rock here, a broken branch there, a boot print in soft earth that indicated direction of travel. The trail led them to a Forest Service road 3 miles from their insertion point. A black SUV sat in a small clearing, its tinted windows reflecting the morning sun. The vehicle appeared empty, but it had clearly been used as a staging area. Equipment cases in the cargo area, a laptop secured to the center console, a satellite communications array mounted on the roof. Kira approached carefully, checking for booby traps or alarm systems. Found none. Either they had not expected their command post to be compromised, or they had relied on the remote location and 5 armed contractors to provide security. The laptop was password protected, but Caraway had taught her basic digital intrusion techniques. She bypassed the security in less than 3 minutes, accessing the system's file structure. What she found made her blood run cold. Operational orders authorized by General Marcus Blackwood. 5 contractors tasked with threat elimination during training evolution. Specific instructions that deaths should appear accidental. Suggested methods including falls from elevation exposure or animal attacks. And a timeline showing that this operation was Phase 1. Phase 2 involved the arrival of Project Osiris at Fort Carson in 18 hours. Phase 3 was testing the device on Colonel James Caraway. Phase 4 was classified, but the file name was suggestive. Domestic Deployment Authorization. Holloway read over her shoulder, her expression growing darker with each document. Blackwood's planning to use Osiris on American soil. Not just planning, he's got authorization from someone high enough in the government to approve domestic military operations. Kira scrolled through additional files, finding communication logs that referenced meetings with senior Pentagon officials, Intelligence Committee members, names she recognized from news broadcasts and congressional hearings. This was not just Blackwood's operation, it was a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of military and civilian leadership. The radio crackled. "Team 3 to command. No visual on targets at intercept point. Recommend we backtrack to Team 2's last known position. A different voice responded. Older, carrying the gravitas of senior leadership. Negative Team 3, hold position. Team 2 will report when they have visual confirmation. Kira recognized the voice. General Marcus Blackwood, personally commanding the operation from somewhere nearby. We need to move. Holloway's voice carried urgency. If they backtrack and find an engine sound, cut her off. Vehicle approaching on the Forest Service Road, moving fast. Kira grabbed the laptop and they dove into the tree line, taking cover behind a deadfall 30 meters from the SUV. A second black vehicle skidded to a stop beside the command post. The door opened. General Marcus Blackwood emerged. His civilian clothes could not disguise the military bearing, the ramrod posture, the commanding presence. He moved to the command post laptop, his face darkening as he realized it had been accessed. Team 3, Team 4 converge on command post immediately. We have a compromise. Blackwood drew a sidearm from a shoulder holster, scanning the tree line with the steady calm of someone who had been in combat before stars and politics had redefined his role. His eyes passed over their hiding spot without recognition, but he knew someone was close. Specialist Ashford, his voice carried across the clearing. I know you're here. I know you've accessed my operational files, and I know you think you've won. Kira remained motionless. Your father was a good man, one of the finest operators I ever commanded. His death was a tragedy, but it was a necessary tragedy. Project Osiris represented a capability that could end conflicts before they began, save American lives by making our enemies compliant rather than dead. Blackwood's voice carried the conviction of a true believer. That's worth 20 men. That's worth 200 men. That's worth whatever price must be paid to protect American interests. The sound of approaching vehicles grew louder. Reinforcements. The remaining contractors responding to Blackwood's call. Kira met Holloway's eyes. Time to move. They slipped through the forest, silent as shadows. Behind them, Blackwood stood in the clearing, surrounded by contractors who would not find their targets, because the hunters had become the hunted. And Kira Ashford had learned long ago that the best revenge was not quick. It was thorough, it was documented, and it was absolutely inescapable. To be continued in Part 3, The Sword Reforged. Editing this message will create a new conversation branch. You can switch between branches using the arrow navigation buttons. The Colorado forest swallowed them like a living thing. Kira and Holloway moved through the undergrowth with the disciplined silence of operators who understood that sound meant death. Behind them, the distant rumble of vehicle engines marked the contractor reinforcements converging on the compromised command post. Blackwood would be furious. 2 of his contractors dead, his laptop accessed, his carefully planned elimination operation unraveling with every passing minute. But fury made men sloppy, made them take risks, made them overcommit to emotional responses rather than tactical necessities. Kira was counting on that. They had covered perhaps 2 miles when Holloway signaled a halt. The intelligence officer's breathing was controlled but elevated. The morning's exertions, combined with the psychological weight of her first kill, had taken a toll that physical fitness alone could not compensate for. We need a plan. Holloway kept her voice barely above a whisper. 3 contractors still active, plus Blackwood himself. They'll have air assets within the hour. Thermal imaging. Maybe dogs. Kira checked the appropriated tablet. The tactical display showed the remaining contractors spreading out from the command post location. Methodical search pattern, professional execution, but they were searching in the wrong direction. They assume we're running toward the rally point? Standard evasion protocol. Put distance between yourself and the threat. We're not running toward the rally point. No. Kira pulled up the satellite imagery stored on the tablet, zooming in on a structure approximately 4 miles northwest of their current position. Forest Service Station, abandoned since budget cuts in 2019. But it still has hardline communication capability, emergency services backbone. Holloway studied the image. You want to call for help. I want to transmit evidence. Everything on this laptop, the operational orders, the authorization chain, the communication logs linking Blackwood to domestic deployment plans. Kira met Holloway's eyes. I've spent 6 years building a distribution network. Journalists, congressional staffers, military investigators who've been waiting for proof that something was wrong with the official Task Force Sabre narrative. One transmission, and this goes to 40 different recipients simultaneously. And Blackwood, once the evidence is transmitted, he's finished. Court-martial, congressional investigation, criminal prosecution. It doesn't matter if he kills us after that. The truth survives. Holloway absorbed the plan, her intelligence training evaluating vulnerabilities and contingencies. What about Colonel Caraway? He's supposed to be Blackwood's test subject when Osiris arrives. Caraway has his own extraction protocol. Once the evidence transmits, he activates. Federal marshals, military police. He's had the operation planned for years, just waiting for the trigger. You trust him that much? Kira thought about the silver-haired colonel who had found her 6 years ago, who had told her the truth about her father, who had trained her and mentored her and become the closest thing to family she had ever known. He's the only person I trust completely. They moved again, northwest through terrain that grew increasingly rugged. The Forest Service station sat on a ridge overlooking a valley that had once been prime logging territory. Now it was wilderness, reclaimed by nature, forgotten by bureaucrats who had never ventured beyond their climate-controlled offices. The sun climbed toward its zenith as they navigated rocky outcroppings and dense undergrowth. Twice they heard helicopters in the distance, search patterns expanding as Blackwood committed more resources to finding his escaped targets. But the forest was vast, and two women who moved like ghosts through the wilderness were nearly impossible to find from the air. Nearly. The station appeared through the trees just after noon, a weathered wooden structure that had seen better decades. Solar panels on the roof, a communications antenna rising from one corner, the kind of remote installation that emergency services maintain for worst-case scenarios. Kira studied the approach for 15 minutes before moving. No signs of occupation, no vehicles, no movement behind the grimy windows. But something felt wrong. The hair on the back of her neck prickled. The instinct her father had supposedly possessed, the ability to sense danger before it materialized. Wait! Holloway froze mid-step. Kira scanned the tree line surrounding the station, looking for anomalies, disturbances in the natural pattern. There, 40 meters to the left of the main entrance, a shape that did not belong, human, prone, camouflaged but not invisible to eyes that knew what to look for. And there, 20 meters to the right, another shape, another contractor waiting in ambush. Blackwood had anticipated their destination. Of course he had. He was a 4-star general with decades of tactical experience. He would have analyzed their options the moment he realized the laptop was compromised, would have identified the limited locations where they could transmit evidence, would have positioned assets accordingly. The Forest Service station was a trap. Holloway had noticed the shapes as well. Her hand moved toward her appropriated weapon. Kira shook her head slightly. 2 targets in prepared positions with clear fields of fire. Approaching the station would be suicide. But there was another option. She pulled up the tablet again, studying the topographical data, looking for something she had noticed earlier, but dismissed as irrelevant. A second communications node, 3 miles further north. Emergency Services Relay Tower, automated, unmanned, but connected to the same backbone as the forest station, if they could reach it before Blackwood repositioned his remaining assets. Kira showed Holloway the display. The intelligence officer nodded understanding. They withdrew, silent as shadows. The contractors at the forest station never knew their targets had been within 100 meters of their position. The relay tower stood on a rocky promontory, overlooking a valley that stretched toward the distant peaks of the Continental Divide. A utilitarian structure of steel and concrete, solar panels and battery backup. A satellite uplink dish pointed toward the sky. No contractors, no ambush positions. Just a forgotten piece of infrastructure that might just save everything. Kira approached the access panel with Holloway covering her back. The lock was standard government issue, designed to keep out vandals and curious hikers rather than trained operators. She had it open in 30 seconds. The interior was cramped, banks of equipment covered in dust, a control terminal that looked like it had not been serviced since the Obama administration, but the power indicators showed green. The system was operational. Kira connected the laptop to the terminal, beginning the process of accessing the emergency services backbone. The transmission protocols were antiquated but functional, designed to work even when modern infrastructure failed. How long Holloway stood at the entrance, weapon ready, eyes scanning the tree line. 5 minutes to establish connection, another 3 to transmit the full evidence package. We might not have 8 minutes. The distant sound of helicopter rotors grew louder. Kira's fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing security protocols, establishing the connection that would carry 3 decades of buried truth to 40 recipients who had been waiting for exactly this moment. The upload progress bar appeared. 3%, 7%, 12%. The helicopter sound intensified, no longer distant, close enough that Kira could feel the vibration through the floor of the relay station. Holloway pressed herself against the doorframe, raising her weapon. "They've found us!" 23%. Kira kept working, monitoring the upload, watching the progress bar crawl across the screen with agonizing slowness. 31%. The helicopter appeared over the ridge, a black civilian model modified for tactical operations. No markings, no identification, the kind of aircraft that officially did not exist. It circled once, then began descending toward a clearing approximately 200 meters from the relay tower. 44%. 3 figures emerged from the helicopter before it had fully touched down, moving with the coordinated efficiency of professionals, weapons up, spreading out to approach the relay station from multiple angles. 57%. "Kira!" Holloway's voice was tight but controlled. "We're about to have company." 63%. Kira pulled her own weapon, the suppressed Pu-26 she had taken from the first contractor. 15 rounds, 3 targets, plus whoever remained in the helicopter. The math was not encouraging. 71%. The contractors approached, moving from cover to cover. Professional fire and movement. They would reach the station in less than 2 minutes. 78%. Kira made a decision. "Holloway, when this upload hits 100%, there's a fail-safe protocol. Red button on the console. Press it and the transmission locks. They can't stop it, can't recall it, can't intercept it." Holloway understood what she was being told. "You're going out there. I'm buying time." 84%. Kira moved to the doorway, checking sight lines, calculating angles of approach. The contractors had split into a standard assault formation, 2 moving directly toward the station, 1 circling to flank. When the upload completes, you press that button. Then you get out through the maintenance hatch in the floor. There's a service tunnel that leads to the equipment shed 50 meters downslope. You get to the trees, you disappear. "What about you?" 91%. Kira met Holloway's eyes. "I didn't come here to survive. I came here to finish what my father started, to make sure Blackwood pays for what he did. Everything else is secondary." 94%, 97%, 100%. The upload complete indicator flashed green. Kira did not wait for Holloway to react. She activated the failsafe protocol herself. Pressed the red button that locked the transmission. Watched the screen display 40 successful deliveries to 40 different recipients. Senate Armed Services Committee, Department of Justice, Washington Post, New York Times, military investigators who had been waiting for exactly this evidence. It was done. Whatever happened next, the truth would survive. Blackwood could kill her, could kill Holloway, could burn this relay station to the ground. It would not matter. She had completed the mission her father never could. "The transmission is complete and locked," she told Holloway. "Get out through the maintenance hatch. I'm going to buy time for your extraction." "You already sent it before even telling me to, before everything. Colonel Caraway taught me that operations succeed in the preparation phase. I prepared for this moment 6 years ago. He's backup. He was always just backup. This was always my mission to complete." Holloway stared at her for a moment, then nodded once. Respect replacing confusion. "Give them hell, Ashford." Kira stepped through the doorway, into the Colorado sunlight, into the final confrontation she had been preparing for, since Colonel Caraway had shown her the broken sword tattoo and explained what it meant. The first contractor saw her immediately. His weapon came up, but Kira was already moving, already firing. The suppressed P-26 coughed twice, both rounds finding center mass. The contractor went down. The second contractor returned fire, rounds snapping past Kira's head as she dove behind a boulder. Rock chips sprayed her face. One cut opened her cheek. Blood ran warm down her jaw. She rolled, came up firing. 3 rounds, 2 hits. The contractor staggered, fell. The flanking contractor had reached a position with a clear angle on her cover. His first burst tore chunks from the boulder. His second would find flesh. Kira moved again, sprinting toward a fallen tree that offered concealment, if not cover. Rounds tracked her movement. One caught her left arm, a graze that burned like fire but did not stop her. She returned fire. 2 rounds. 1 hit. The contractor went to one knee, still dangerous, still armed. Click. Empty magazine. Kira ejected, reached for her spare. Realized she did not have one. The wounded contractor raised his weapon. Time slowed. Kira saw the barrel align with her center mass. Saw the contractor's finger tighten on the trigger. Saw death approaching with the inevitability of a closing door. Then the contractor's head snapped sideways. A red mist bloomed in the air. He collapsed. Kira spun toward the sound of the shot. Colonel James Carraway emerged from the tree line, a scoped rifle in his hands, his silver hair catching the sunlight, his weathered face showing the grim satisfaction of a man who had just protected something precious. "Told you I'd be watching your back, Kate." Kira felt something release in her chest, something she had not realized she was holding. The upload saw the confirmation on my monitoring system, 40 successful deliveries. It's done. As if in answer, a tone sounded from inside the relay tower. Holloway appeared in the doorway, giving a thumbs up before disappearing back inside to secure the equipment. Blackwood's still in the helicopter. Carraway moved to join her, his eyes never stopping their scan of the surrounding terrain. He won't run. Not his style. He'll want to face this directly. As if summoned by the words, the helicopter's engine powered up. The aircraft lifted from the clearing. But instead of fleeing, it moved toward the relay station. Toward the 2 people who had just destroyed everything Marcus Blackwood had spent 3 decades protecting. The aircraft settled onto the rocky ground 30 meters from where Kira and Carraway stood. The rotors wound down. The door opened. General Marcus Blackwood stepped out. He looked older than he had in the briefing room. The events of the past 24 hours had carved new lines into his face, had stolen something vital from behind his cold blue eyes. But he still moved with the bearing of a commander, still carried himself like a man who had ordered armies into battle. He was not armed. His hands hung empty at his sides as he walked toward them. "Colonel Carraway, I wondered when you'd finally show yourself." Carraway kept his rifle trained on the general's chest. 3 decades, Marcus. 3 decades I've been waiting for this moment. Waiting to what? Murder me in a Colorado forest. That's not justice, James. That's vengeance. Maybe I don't care about the difference anymore. Blackwood stopped 10 meters away, close enough to talk, too far to pose a physical threat. His eyes moved to Kira. "Specialist Ashford, your father would be disappointed. He believed in the chain of command, believed in the mission. He would never have betrayed his country the way you have." Kira felt the familiar rage surge through her veins, but she controlled it, channeled it into something cold and hard and absolutely certain. "My father believed in you. He trusted you to bring him home, and you murdered him. I made a command decision. The mission required nothing." Kira stepped forward, her voice cutting through his justifications like a blade through silk. "I've read the operational files. I've seen the timeline. Task Force Sabre had secured Osiris. Extraction was 17 minutes away. You could have waited, should have waited." She was close enough now to see the sweat beading on his forehead, the tremor in his hands that he was trying to hide. "But you didn't wait, because you knew that once those operators returned home, they would talk, would question why a Soviet neuroweapon needed to be retrieved at all, would start asking questions that might lead to answers you couldn't afford. That's speculation. You have no proof. I have the video." Blackwood's face went pale. The bunker had internal surveillance, Soviet security system that was still operational when Task Force Sabre breached the facility. And someone, one of your intelligence analysts, who developed a conscience, preserved the footage before you could destroy it. Kira pulled out the tablet. activated a video file. The image was grainy, degraded by time and format conversion, but the audio was clear. A younger Marcus Blackwood's voice crackled through the speaker. Eagle actual to Saber lead. Initiate demolition sequence. Another voice, her father's voice. She would recognize it anywhere. Eagle actual negative. We are not clear. Repeat. We are not clear. Extraction is 17 minutes out. Hold demolition. A pause, then Blackwood again. Saber lead, you are ordered to proceed with demolition. Authorization code Omega 77. Eagle actual, there are 20 men in this facility. American operators. You cannot. That's an order, Captain. Proceed with demolition. Confirm. Silence, then a third voice. Younger, frightened. Sir, they're initiating the charges remotely. We can't stop it. We can't. The audio dissolved into static. Then a roar that overwhelmed the microphone. Then nothing. Kira stopped the playback. 20 men. My father. Your own operators. Buried alive because you were afraid of what they might say. Blackwood stood frozen, the face of a man watching his entire world collapse. I did what I had to do. For the country. For yourself. Caraway's voice was ice. Osiris was never about national security. It was about power, about having a weapon that could make anyone comply with any order. Do you think I don't know about the domestic deployment authorization, about the plans to use Osiris on American citizens? Blackwood's jaw tightened. Dissent is a cancer that weakens nations. Sometimes harsh measures are necessary to preserve stability. Sometimes you sound exactly like the enemies we swore to fight. Kira stepped closer, close enough to see her own reflection in Blackwood's eyes. It's over, General. The evidence has already been transmitted. Senate Armed Services Committee, Department of Justice, 40 journalists who've been waiting for exactly this moment. I sent it myself, before I even stepped outside to face your contractors. By tonight, your name will be synonymous with treason. Blackwood's hand moved toward his jacket. Caraway's rifle came up. Don't. But Blackwood was not reaching for a weapon. He pulled out a photograph, weathered and creased from years of handling. He looked at it for a long moment, then turned it so Kira could see. A young captain in desert camouflage, smiling at the camera with the easy confidence of someone who had not yet learned that the world could be cruel, that the people you trusted could betray you. Ethan Ashford. I kept this, Blackwood said quietly, all these years. I told myself it was to remember his sacrifice, to honor what he gave for the mission. He looked up, meeting Kira's eyes. But that was a lie. I kept it because I could never quite convince myself that what I did was right. Because some part of me knew that I murdered the finest operator I ever commanded, and his 19 brothers, for a weapon that should have been destroyed the moment we found it. The photograph blurred in Kira's vision, not from tears. She had trained herself not to cry, but from memory, a memory that was not her own, but felt like it belonged to her anyway. Caraway had described this moment once, the night before the Kuwait deployment. Task Force Sabre gathered in a makeshift barracks. 20 warriors who did not know they had less than 48 hours to live. Ethan Ashford had pulled out a guitar, a battered acoustic he had carried through 3 deployments. His fingers had found the strings with the ease of long practice, and he had sung, "Of all the money that e'er I had, I spent it in good company, and all the harm I've ever done, alas, it was to none but me." The Parting Glass, an Irish farewell song, a song about endings and regrets and the things left unsaid. And all I've done for want of wit to memory now I can't recall. So fill to me the parting glass. Good night and joy be to you all. The other operators had listened in silence, some with their eyes closed, some with their hands wrapped around drinks that might be their last. And when Ethan had finished, he had looked at the sky visible through the barracks window, at the stars that would witness whatever came next. If I don't come back from this one, tell my daughter I sang for her. Tell her the last song her father ever sang was about saying goodbye. And tell her I'm sorry I never got to say it to her face. He had not come back. But Kira had the song now, had the story, had the photograph in her hands. It was not enough. But it was something. The confession hung in the air. 3 decades of guilt, 3 decades of lies, finally crumbling under the weight of truth. I won't apologize. Apologies are meaningless, and I won't ask for forgiveness because there is no forgiveness for what I did. Blackwood squared his shoulders, the bearing of a general returning even as his empire collapsed. But I will tell you this. Your father died well. He died trying to save his men, died screaming orders into a radio that I had already decided to ignore. He was a hero, Specialist Ashford. Whatever else I am, I can tell you that with certainty. Kira took the photograph from his hand, looked at her father's face, the face she had never seen except in pictures, the smile she had never heard except in stories told by a mother who had died of cancer when Kira was 16. The voice she had only just heard for the first time in a recording of his final moments. I know he was a hero. I've always known. She met Blackwood's eyes. That's why I'm not going to kill you. That's why Colonel Caraway isn't going to kill you. Because my father believed in justice, believed in accountability, believed that America was better than the men who sometimes led it. The sound of helicopters grew louder, multiple aircraft approaching from the south. Military markings visible against the afternoon sky. Those are federal marshals, military police. They've been waiting for my signal, for the evidence that would give them authority to act. Blackwood watched the helicopters approach, his face showing something that might have been relief. You planned this from the beginning, every step, every contingency. Colonel Caraway planned the framework. I executed, the way my father would have executed any mission, with precision, with determination, with absolute commitment to the objective. The helicopters landed, armed personnel deployed, surrounding the relay station, surrounding Blackwood. A woman in a business suit approached, federal prosecutor. Kira had met her once 2 years ago in a secure location where evidence was exchanged and promises were made. General Marcus Blackwood, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, dereliction of duty resulting in death, unauthorized domestic deployment of military assets, and 20 counts of negligent homicide. Blackwood did not resist as handcuffs were applied, did not protest as rights were read, did not look back as he was led toward a waiting helicopter. But at the door he paused. Specialist Ashford, Kira turned. The sword on your arm, the broken blade. It meant something to your father, something about how warriors can be broken but still serve, how damage doesn't mean defeat. He held her gaze. You've proven that today. Whatever happens to me, whatever legacy remains, remember that you've honored him. More than medals ever could, more than memorials ever will. Then he was gone, into the helicopter, into custody, into a future that would include courtrooms and cameras and the slow grinding machinery of justice. Kira watched the aircraft lift off, felt Caraway's hand settle on her shoulder. It's over, Kate. The nickname only he used, the name her father had wanted to call her before settling on Kira. Is it? The hard part is, the fighting, the hiding, the pretending to be something you're not. He squeezed gently. What comes next is different. Healing, remembering, learning to live as yourself instead of as a weapon pointed at a single target. Kira looked down at her arm, at the broken sword tattoo with its 7 hash marks. 7 lives taken in service of this moment. She had become what Caraway had shaped her to be, an operator capable of matching the best special forces in the world, a weapon honed for a single purpose. But weapons could be reforged. Purposes could be redefined, and broken swords could still cut. 3 months later, Kira stood in Arlington National Cemetery as the setting sun painted the Virginia sky in shades of orange and gold. The memorial wall had been updated, 20 names carved into black granite. Task Force Sabre, finally acknowledged after 3 decades of official denial. Captain Ethan Ashford, Lieutenant David Caraway, Master Sergeant Lucas Kane. The list continued. 20 warriors who had given everything for a mission they believed in. 20 families who had finally learned the truth about how their loved ones had died. Small clusters of people stood before the wall. Family members, some meeting for the first time, all united by shared loss and the truth that had finally emerged. An elderly woman placed flowers beneath Ethan Ashford's name, her weathered hands trembling, her face lined with decades of grief that had never fully healed. Margaret Ashford, Kira's grandmother, the mother who had raised Ethan, who had received a flag and a lie instead of a living son. Kira approached slowly, uncertain. For all her training, all her preparation, she had not prepared for this. The old woman looked up, her eyes hazel like Kira's, like Ethan's widened with recognition. "You look just like him." Her voice was soft, roughened by age and emotion. "I've seen pictures. Your mother sent them, before she passed. But pictures don't capture it. The way you hold yourself, the way your eyes take in everything." She reached out, her fingers trembling as they touched Kira's cheek. "My granddaughter." Kira felt something break inside her, something she had been holding together through sheer will for 6 years, through training and missions and the single-minded pursuit of justice. "I'm sorry." The words came out rough, inadequate. "I should have found you sooner, should have told you what really happened, should have been—" "Hush." Margaret pulled her into an embrace, stronger than her frail frame suggested. "You did what you had to do, what Ethan would have wanted you to do. You brought them home, all of them. That's what matters." They stood together before the wall, grandmother and granddaughter, united by loss and love, and the name carved into granite. Caraway appeared beside them, his dress uniform immaculate, his chest heavy with decorations that had been restored when the truth emerged. "The ceremony's about to begin." He offered his arm to Margaret. "May I escort you, ma'am?" Margaret smiled, the first genuine smile Kira had seen on her face. "James Caraway, still the charmer. Ethan always said you could talk your way into or out of anything. Only when necessary, ma'am." The ceremony was simple. Military honors for 20 warriors, flags presented, taps played, words spoken by generals and senators who had finally acknowledged what had been denied for 3 decades. Kira stood at attention through all of it, her dress uniform bearing the insignia she had earned through the training program she had supposedly infiltrated as a paper pusher. The insignia of an operator, a warrior, a member of the community her father had served. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, Caraway found her at the wall, staring at her father's name. "The Defense Department has established a new oversight unit, Ghost Protocol, independent authority to investigate classified programs that operate outside normal channels." Kira did not look away from the granite. "They want me to lead the field operations team. They want the person who brought down a 4-star general and exposed a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government." Caraway's voice carried pride that he did not try to hide. "They want someone who's proven she can operate in the shadows, navigate classified worlds, find truth where others see only secrets." Kira finally turned, meeting his eyes. "What do you think I should do?" Caraway smiled, the rare, genuine expression that transformed his weathered face. "I think your father would be proud, whatever you decide, but I also think there are more Blackwoods out there, more operations that sacrifice operators for political convenience, more weapons that should never be deployed." He pulled a folder from his jacket. Red classification stamps covering the cover. "Project Lazarus, another Soviet recovery operation. This one in Siberia. Currently being planned by elements within the CIA who didn't get the message about Osiris being shut down." Kira took the folder, studied the summary page. 72 hours until deployment. If you want it." She looked back at the wall, at her father's name, at the broken sword that meant warriors could be damaged but still serve. Then she looked at the folder in her hands, at the new mission, the new enemy, the new opportunity to protect operators from commanders who valued weapons over warriors. "I want it." 3 weeks later, Kira stood in a converted warehouse that served as Ghost Protocol's operations center. Banks of computer equipment lined the walls, surveillance feeds and satellite imagery and encrypted communication channels displayed on screens. Her team assembled around the central planning table. Tessa Holloway, Army Intelligence, the woman who had watched her back in the Colorado wilderness. Now her intelligence analyst and second-in-command, Colt Reardon, former Navy SEAL, the man who had called her deadweight, who had resigned his commission to join Ghost Protocol after learning the truth about what she had accomplished, what she had survived. 2 other operators, handpicked by Caraway from his network of trusted professionals. Men and women who believed in the mission, believed in accountability, believed in Kira Ashford. Siberian insertion in 36 hours. Kira activated the main display. Satellite imagery of a research facility buried in the Russian wilderness. Our objective is simple. Confirm the existence of Project Lazarus technology. Document CIA involvement. Extract before Russian security forces can respond. She looked at each team member in turn. This is not a combat mission. This is an investigation. We gather evidence. We expose wrongdoing. We let the legal system handle accountability. Her eyes found Reardon. Questions. The SEAL shook his head slowly. The contempt that had once marked his interactions with her replaced by something like respect. No, ma'am. Good. Kira turned back to the display, already running through scenarios, planning contingencies, preparing for a mission that would take her team into hostile territory against threats that officially did not exist. This was the work now. Not revenge, not personal vendetta, but the systematic protection of those who served, the exposure of those who betrayed. Her father had died believing he served something larger than himself, that his sacrifice meant something. Blackwood had betrayed that belief, but Ghost Protocol would honor it by ensuring no other operators died for commanders who valued weapons over warriors, by holding the powerful accountable when they abused their authority, by being the broken swords that still cut, the ghosts that still fought, the legacy that refused to be buried. That evening after the team dispersed to prepare for deployment, Kira stood alone on the warehouse rooftop. Washington's lights spread below her like a constellation, each point representing lives she was now responsible for protecting. She pulled up her sleeve, studied the broken sword tattoo in the city light. 7 hash marks, 7 threats eliminated. But the tattoo meant more than a body count now. It represented a promise kept, a legacy honored, a father's sacrifice transformed into something that would protect others. Her phone buzzed, a text from her grandmother. I found more of his letters, the ones he wrote before you were born. Would you like to read them? Kira stared at the message. The letters her father had written to a daughter he would never meet. Words from beyond the grave that had waited 3 decades to be read. She typed her response. Yes, I'd like that very much. Then she looked back at the city, at the night sky above, at the stars that had witnessed everything humanity had done and would do. Somewhere out there in the vast darkness between worlds, she liked to think her father was watching, proud of what she had become, at peace with how his sacrifice had finally been honored. I finished it, Dad. Her voice was soft, meant only for herself in the night. Blackwood's facing trial. Task Force Sabre is honored, and I'm going to make sure it never happens again. She touched the broken sword on her wrist. The sword's been reforged, and it's still sharp. The wind carried her words away, into the darkness, into history, and Kira Ashford, daughter of a hero protege, of a survivor, commander of ghosts, went back inside. There was work to do. There was always work to do, and she was ready.